Hi, and welcome to Northwest Book Talk, where I'm exploring a piece of aviation history with Martin Middlewood, right here in Vancouver, Washington. So, welcome, Martin, to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So, let's talk about your new book that's just hot off the press called Hidden History of Pearson Field. And tell me, first of all, why did you pick the title, Hidden History?
Well, a couple of reasons. One is because if you look in books of aviation and do any reading, Pearson seems to not be there for some odd reason. I've been told that's because most of the authors are East Coast authors. I'm not going to say that's a bias of theirs, but anyway, Pearson's been left out. So that part of it's been hidden. And there are also many tales and stories that are in the book that people don't know about. So that part's also hidden. So it's got a double meaning, kind of.
Yeah, so how long have you been working on this book,
That's a very good question because when does one start working on a book?
right?
I've actually was kind of intrigued by uh, looking at Bill Alley's book on Pearson, which is a picture book, and I ran across a picture of a woman by the name of Edith Fultz. And I'd heard of Amelia Earhart and that, but I didn't know that there was a local pilot here that was also going to become quite famous. And I kind of started investigating about Edith Fultz. I mean, she's standing there with a big smile on her face. She's got her flying gear on and is just like she's very delighted by all this. And so as I investigated her, I found out that she was in the Powder Puff Derby, which is the first women's air derby in 1924. And although there were two divisions in that heavy planes and light planes, she flew in the light plane division and actually came in second, coincidentally with a faster time than Amelia Earhart did, who came in third in the heavy division. So I thought that was intriguing and kind of followed along with that. And then just started digging into her history even more and more and became quite interested in the fact that she had been in England. So she was part of a group of women recruited by Jacqueline Cochrane to go to England. Now, Jacqueline Cochrane took these ladies to England because she had talked to Eleanor Roosevelt about using women to support men and by flying aircraft and allowing men to then fly in combat. So the first offer came from England because they had just been through fighting with Germany and the battle for Britain, and so they needed to recover from that. And so Edith Fultz was one of 17 individuals who went over there, and she spent a year and a half, almost 2 years there, and won what's known as the King's Cross, which was the highest award the royalty or the Queen can give to, or the King at that time can give to any non-British citizen. And then she came back here and continued flying and all of that and ended up dying in 1956 after she had married her third husband and was teaching naval pilots on the Lynx machine, which is the early trainer for flight training. So that's kind of what got me started.
So that's very interesting to me that you started off with women aviators, at a time where I think most of us think of early aviation history on a broad scope as being all male, and then there was a definite feminine presence there, and so I think that's quite interesting that that was what first brought you into the book. So tell me a little bit about some more about Pearson Field itself, some of that, how that came to be and kind of wove into your book.
Pearson Field had its first landing, was a dirigible landing in 1905. It was flown over from the Lewis and Clark exhibition two times. And the second time, and both of them were piloted by this fellow by the name of Lincoln Beechey, who was an 18-year-old. The qualities for his job were fearlessness and being a good mechanic. So at 18, I guess he'd found his niche. He went on to become a very important early stunt pilot. Anyway, on his second trip, Beechey came over, landed near the O. Howard House, and he was carrying with him a letter from exhibit management that was addressed to the commander of the barracks. He also along carried another wad of letters that he gave to the postmaster there, and those were all delivered via the mail. So it was actually the first airmail delivery to Vancouver, if not in the Pacific Northwest, and probably possibly in the entire country. So that's the first thing. Now, Beechey did go try to return. It took him 2.5 hours to try to fly back because the wind was against him. So they finally landed near Orchard someplace, deflated the gelatine, which is his name of his dirigible after the Knox Gelatin Company, and then packed it all up in a wagon and took Beechey and his dirigible by wagon back to the exhibition in Portland.
So those are two great kind of big stories. Were there any some little stories that you found intriguing that, didn't make the pages of maybe like you say, it's the hidden history of, so maybe some of those little hidden pieces.
Oh yes, the one that I like is the flight over Bagley Downs in 1924 when the Ku Klux Klan had a rally there that was attended by, depending on the source you look at, 10 to 40,000 people. And at the time, the Ku Klux Klan was pretty big in the Northwest. They advertised that there was going to be a plane carrying a flaming cross over Bagley Downs at that time at one evening during the celebration or the rally. So nobody knew who flew that plane. And that's been intriguing me for a long time since I did some investigation of the Ku Klux Klan around here. So digging into it, Bob Cromwell, who is the former head of the Pearson Museum, gave me 6 gigabytes of information from the National Archives. And digging through that, I found information about what had happened. So what appears to have happened is that Pearson has always been a combination commercial and a military field, even though the commercial field didn't really get full born until about 1930. Now, what happened is the commercial field had flooded, and Lieutenant Oakley Kelly gave permission for commercial flights to come out of Pearson, which seemed like a good thing. Well, one of the pilots that was both a commercial pilot and also a member of the Air Reserve was a fellow by the name of Vern Bookwalter. And he, for $100, decided he would fly this crossover. It turns out that a flaming cross and a airplane made out of cotton and dope to be more hard and durable is not really the best idea to put together. So what Bookwalter did is actually make an illuminated cross out of light bulbs and I assume batteries of some kind. We really don't know. Anyway, so he took off from Pearson Field, did his fly over there and came back and landed. There was a fellow wrote to the Department of War and to the head of Pearson Field, the commander of the barracks actually, and asked who authorized that flight. Well, what happened is that started an incident that embarrassed the Army, and they kind of rolled back to Pearson Field and to Oakley Kelly and to Vern Bookwaller, who were sanctioned, but they really weren't disciplined. They didn't lose any rank, they didn't lose any money, but they were kind of chewed out. And the Army's answer to that was, yes, it was a good thing for you to allow the commercial flights to go out of Pearson Field, but it shouldn't be based on propaganda or any kind of bias. So that was the Army's answer to that whole problem.
So what's fascinating to me that you're revealing in this story is how much in-depth research you must have gone through for this book. So what was that like? What was the maybe overwhelming amount of research you had to do to get to this book to its publication date?
Well, a lot of the research had been done, but what I wanted to do is I wanted to take a different look at it and look at it more in depth and from a different angle a lot of times. Digging out the thing about the flying with the flaming cross, that took considerable, that took years actually to try because I've been looking for that for a long time. And just happened it turned up in this 6 gigabytes of archival research. things start to reveal themselves as you're researching something, like that. They're like little pieces of information pop up, and you kind of put them aside, and pretty soon they make a story, or they help flesh out a person's history. Like Vern Bookwaller, Walter, he was a really good mechanic. He worked for Tex Rankin. He gave Ann Borer, who was a parachutist in the area here around that time, her first flight and crashed with her, which didn't deter her from flying. He also gave her brother his first flight in an airplane. He went on to become an Alaskan bush pilot. He was also instrumental in making the first flight between Washington, or Vancouver specifically, and Medford, Oregon, that became in 1926, which is the first airmail flight that was actually sanctioned. Vancouver's been involved in airmail flights three times. One was, like I mentioned already, Lincoln Beechey. There was another one in 1912 with Walter Edwards, who flew from a golf course over in Portland to Vancouver with letters and then back, which was kind of a semi-sanctioned by the Portland Post Office. And then there was the one that Walter did in 1926. So here's another hidden part, that Pearson has actually been involved in the evolution of airmail throughout this history. And that's another kind of piece that's been missing from the aviation story overall.
Thanks, Martin. We're going to stop for a short appreciation break from our sponsors, and then we're going to return. And I would like to kind of go into what influence Pearson has on the whole community of Vancouver and the surrounding area as well. We'll be right back.
The Columbian in Southwest Washington continues to offer the most comprehensive and consistent coverage of our region and our people, despite the challenges faced by local newspapers nationwide. Valued donations to our community-funded journalism project via the Local Media Foundation pays for local reporters to provide expanded and in-depth coverage of key local issues in print and online, including homelessness, transportation, and the environment. For the most thorough daily coverage, visit Columbian.com. Please consider donating or subscribing today.
For over 20 years, Vancouver Family Magazine has been covering local news, recreation, travel, education, parenting, personalities, and more. We connect your family to people, places, ideas, organizations, helpful resources, and local stories. Pick up your copy every month at over 300 locations all around Clark County, or read online at VancouverFamilyMagazine.com. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and X for even more local news and family fun at Vancouver Family.
The mission of Furry Friends is to rescue abused, abandoned, or otherwise homeless cats in the Vancouver-Portland area and house them in a safe, healthy, and socialized environment until they can find their new forever homes. Furry Friends is a Vancouver 501c3 nonprofit volunteer-run no-kill cat rescue and adoption organization. For more information about Furry Friends, please visit their website at furryfriendswa.org.
Okay, you're listening to Northwest Book Talk. I'm Patty Grasher, and my guest today is Martin Middlewood, author of Hidden History of Pearson Field. And we're going to continue our talk with talking about how Pearson Field has made an influence on the area, the Southwest Washington. How did Pearson Field change? What would I say? How would it change or affect the people in this area?
What's affected it a lot over time. There wasn't an airfield until the Army came in about 1923. And then when Oakley Kelly came, he actually started developing the field and making it so flights could come in and out, building places to store gasoline, airplanes, and other things. So they refined it and leveled the field off too. So that was the first start. It's also brought a lot of interesting people here, like Tex Rankin, for example, who ran an air school there for quite a while. And Tex Rankin actually was a pretty shrewd businessman, because anybody with $250 he would teach to fly, including women. And he taught a lot of women to fly. I saw one count, and I haven't verified this, there were 65 women at least he taught to fly in the early days. So among those were Ann Borer, who I've mentioned, also Dorothy Hester, who became a world stunt flyer who set a record back in the 30s. It wasn't broken until recently in 2012. It also brought in a lot more Army people because during World War I, when they sent soldiers to the woods to kind of diminish the influence of the Wobblies, they put up the spruce plant, which is a huge plant right there, probably in front of where Pearson Museum is today, and extending over into the fort area that put out tens of thousands of board feet of lumber. Now, what they did is they just basically trimmed the lumber up into big chunks, and then that was sent other places to have it sawn into smaller pieces to build airplanes. So that was it. And that was up there for it was built in 90 days and it was gone right after World War I. So it was destroyed in 18 months. So the other thing is it gave people a place to go. So one of the things that people don't know a lot about is that the Army trained its cavalry officers and had cavalry officers until 1942 using the game of polo. So there were 3 different polo fields at different times around Pearson, and there were even grandstands built so that people could come and watch Army polo players, and they came from all over the Northwest and from as far south as San Francisco. So they watch these polo games, and they would be advertising the Columbian and all that. So you have that kind of influence. We had 2 different Russian landings, and then in 1975, it was decided that there would be a Russian monument put up, which was at first down by Highway 14, but then eventually is moved right next to Pearson Museum now. So that was the first Russian monument in the United States. So those are just a few of the things that Pearson has done to kind of be part of the community.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. That's new to me. I didn't know that that monument was the first Russian monument in the United States. That's kind of cool because we actually have, even though things are kind of tipsy with Russia right now, we do have, Vancouver does have a pretty strong relationship with Russia with that first the transpolar landings. And, even in the early days, we had Russian trappers and that kind of thing coming into the area. So let me just go back to your book. When did it actually start gelling for you that you wanted to put this together?
Well, in 2022, it dawned on me that there's going to be an anniversary coming up in 2025. I thought, well, if I was going to do a book, it would be a good idea to maybe kick it off with the centennial.
Right,
So I
right.
started working on it in late 2022 and pitched it to the History Press, and they said, yeah, go ahead and do it. And then I just started doing it there. I have to be honest, I was also working in parallel because I write the column, the images from the attic for the Columbian, which appears every week. And a lot of the writing I did, I would do a lot of the research and I turn it into a column and at the same time make it part of the book. So I got double duty out of that.
So yeah, that's great. I kind of wanted to mention that you've been a longtime
Columnist,
author, writer,
yeah.
publisher, all in this area for a long time. Do you think this book will have an influence going forward?
I think, well, it's locally, I think yes. Nationally, I don't really have any great hopes for that. But because I took different look at a few things, it may spark some wider interest. Both of the Russian landings, for example, people know about those, but if you stop for a minute and think about it, they were both bombers. Think about that for a minute. Russia in 1929 and 1937 has 2 bombers land in the United States. Do you think there was some subtle message that Stalin was trying to send to the United States? I
Yeah,
do. I
yeah,
do.
right.
And I'm sure that wasn't lost on uh, George Marshall in 1937, who was the commander of the base at that time. So there's that. The other thing is about looking at different pieces. The whole airmail piece that I have already mentioned is that fits right into aviation history. So that's another thing that kind of knits together that comes out that I don't think people have recognized before. And the thing that goes unrecognized about General Marshall is that in his biographies, his heading the barracks is not, as if it's mentioned, it's just in passing. So, but it also offered him the first opportunity to operate and manage an international incident. And it was a good preparation for what he did after the war. So I think that's another thing that could be investigated more deeply by future biographers of Marshall.
And I think also, like you mentioned earlier, that the influence of women aviators was very strong in this area that maybe wasn't as strong in other parts of the country, or was it?
I think I'm going to have to say it probably goes unrecognized, but there were many women pilots. One of the key ones, the first woman to fly in Nebraska, for example, was Evelyn Waldron. Now, before she died, she had flown 37,000 flight hours.
Wow.
That's a tremendous number. She was a flight instructor. She came here. She was actually invited by Jacqueline Cochran to go to England and fly for the ATA with Edith Foltz, but her mother had cancer, so she decided to stay home. But she went on to she managed several airports, one in North Dakota. She managed one down in Albany, Oregon. She wrote a column every week for what was going on at the airport, who was getting trained and all that, and did a great job of that. And then ended up here flying out of Evergreen Field as an instructor and a pilot, called kind of the grandmother of pilots. So she has a long history.
So, Martin, are you yourself a pilot?
I am not. My only piloting has been with paper airplanes.
Well, that's good. So, what's the fascination with aviation?
I think it's just an interesting topic. I mean, I've dealt with technology for a really long time, and in terms of the development of technology, it was interesting to kind of follow in my book how things progress from lighter than aircraft to dirigibles to beginnings of a heavier aircraft, and how that technology has changed, and how the distance has changed, how a gas tank back in the early days would be maybe 10 gallons and it could go 100 miles. And today we can go, you know, thousands of miles without refueling a plane.
Yeah, that's pretty phenomenal that we can even practically go to the moon now, or well beyond that, actually. So, another little question here is how how difficult was it to put all the pieces that you had in the book because it just covers so much.
Well, that the difficulty was in the organization, I think. It had a lot of stories, and how do I fit them together? How do I put them to make them both interesting and accessible to the reader? So what I try to do is then basically put them in piles. So we talked about early aviation, we talked about airmail, and I talked about, put the women and the men pilots in two separate chapters. And then there's a chapter for the Army. So the reader could kind of find a point of interest and enter the book there. So they didn't really have to kind of start at 1905 and read through till, you know, 1942 or whatever.
Right, you could just pick and choose. So, and then
Yeah.
your book has so many photos in it. So how did you get access to all those photos?
Um, Photos are kind of a tricky thing. There's a lot of local photos here. I mean, the Clark County Historical Museum has photos, and I was able to glean several from there for free. The Park Service here does have some photos too, like of the spruce plant and that. I took some photos from there with their permission, of course. You always have to get permission. I went down to Cottage Grove to the Oregon Aviation Historical Society, spent a day there looking through their photos and as well as their documents for the book. I did some research online. I've been over to the Oregon Historical Society several times looking at old photos, getting information that they had, listening to um, tapes that they had of Lee Hing's oral history, finding a notebook of Evelyn Waldron that had a bunch of clips that she had been collecting and that kind of thing. So you just have to kind of poke and drive. The hardest thing, I think, for people looking for photos, if you put in a person's name and hit return and up comes Google with, yeah, there's a lot of photos out there, but they're under the auspices of Getty or some other collector of photos. And some of those photos they may own, but a lot of times they're leasing them from another organization. So and they want you to pay a pretty good premium for those photos. So if you order one, you're actually paying twice, both with the photo for the Getty piece or whoever the organization is, and then this organization that they're licensing it from. So it's best to go directly to people if you can. I've found that most universities, most historical museums, and even places like the Smithsonian have a very reasonable pricing of if you need a photo, from $15 to $20. That's not too bad. The Library of Congress and the National Archive also have photos, and that's another place to look. As long as you're searching, you might even try Wikipedia, because Wikipedia uses only public domain photos, and you can maybe borrow one of those. So there's a lot of places to look for photos.
Just a tiny follow-up question. How many photos do you think actually were in the book?
There's about 50.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It just seems like a lot more, I guess, because it's just so packed together with
Well, they
information
wanted
and
more,
stuff.
but I was in an argument with them because I wanted more text. So we got rid of 25 photos so I could have a longer space for text.
Okay, so I'm going to end up with a final question, and that is, was there any myths or misconceptions about Pearson Field that your research helped kind of clarify or correct or just bring to the light?
I'd say the fact that it has this broader connection to aviation history. And it's that fact that it's the longest and oldest operating flying field in the nation. So that's a significant thing.
Yeah, I think that would be quite significant. All right. Well, thank Martin for speaking with us. I hope your book is a great success. I think I work at the bookstore there at Fort Vancouver, and so I know that we're looking very forward to this book as being one of our top bestsellers for expanding some of the history and knowledge of this area. So thanks again, Martin, for sharing with us.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Northwest Book Talk with Patty Grasher on KXRW 99.9, serving the greater Vancouver area. You can discover more about Martin Middlewood, his book, Hidden Journey of Pearson Field, on northwestbooktalk.com. If you enjoy local radio shows such as this and would like to keep us on the air, please visit us on the web at www.kxrw.fm and click on the support button. I want to thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you again right here on KXRW Northwest Book Talk.
A big thank you to our founding partners at Morel Inc. Print and Marketing for their ongoing support of community radio. Morel Inc. is a woman-owned, union-staffed, state-of-the-art print shop that since 1993 has offered high-quality, creative, and innovative printing and marketing solutions. Morel Inc.'s experienced staff creates partnerships with their clients and uses the latest technologies to meet their needs. More information about which of Morel Inc.'s products, printing, and marketing strategies will best serve your next project and budget can be found at morelinc.com.